This week on Healthy Living, we'll see the challenges of clean water, hygiene and sanitation in Africa and what can be done. A company uses an innovative technology to bring clean water to underserved communities. And WHO says COVID-19 is no longer a public health emergency of international concern. Plus, a Ghanaian activist swims the Volta River to spotlight water pollution. These stories and more in this edition of Healthy Living. Hello and welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Kamiti Kibayasi. Clean water, proper sanitation and hygiene contribute to good health and well-being. Yet 2 billion people around the world lack safe drinking water, according to the United Nations. UN agencies say many people worldwide use inadequate sanitation services or practice open defecation. Furthermore, half of all health care facilities where proper hygiene practices are critical lack water and soap or alcohol-based hand sanitizing solution. When clean water and these services are not available, diseases like cholera and polio can spread and affect children and communities. Each year, preventable diseases due to unsafe water and poor sanitation kill at least 1.4 million people globally. Many victims are children under 5. UNICEF is sounding the alarm on the lack of basic clean water, sanitation and hygiene, and the devastating consequences experienced by some communities in Africa.
Inadequate access to water, sanitation and hygiene, also referred to as WASH, is threatening the lives of 190 million children in 10 African countries. A United Nations Children's Fund's analysis says about 1/3 of children in these countries lack access to basic water at home. The countries mentioned include Benin, Cameroon, Nigeria and Somalia. Sanjay Wajisekura, UNICEF Director of Programs, says Africa is facing a water catastrophe. While climate and water-related shocks are escalating globally, nowhere else in the world do the risks compound as severely for children. He says devastating storms, floods, and historic droughts are already destroying facilities and homes, contaminating water resources, creating hunger crises, and spreading disease. Many of the worst affected countries, particularly in the Sahel, are also facing instability and armed conflict, according to UNICEF. This further aggravates children's lack of access to clean water and sanitation. Many of them die as a result.
The world is facing an upsurge in cholera, as many of you know, with more than 30 countries now being affected. And many of them haven't had the disease in decades. So it is a lesson for us, a very clear one, that safe drinking water, sanitation and hygiene are long-term and sustainable solutions.
UNICEF says 2 billion people around the world do not have access to safe drinking water, and almost half of the world's population lack basic sanitation services. The UN agency is calling for an increase in funding, strengthening climate resilience, and prioritizing the most vulnerable communities in WASH programs.
Dr. Rabiat Ahmed Rufai is the medical director of Blue Ivy Medical Center in Abuja, Nigeria. She discusses the health impact of water, sanitation and hygiene and how to improve access in Africa.
UNICEF is tirelessly working towards providing clean water and sanitation to children globally. And in their recent analysis of 2020, they found out that 1 in every 4 children lack access to basic hand washing services at home. Women and children are disproportionately affected, sometimes during menstruation, because of lack of access to this sanitation and safe and toilets. These girls miss school. They don't go to school because they lack such facilities. Children also in conflict areas, children from poverty-stricken areas lack these facilities at home. So they are at more risk to coming down with all these diarrheal diseases and infections. The most common waterborne diseases, which is endemic in northern Nigeria especially, are cholera, typhoid fever, giardiasis. These are all waterborne diseases, amoebiasis, schistosomiasis, which is called the bilharzia diseases. While sanitation-borne diseases are paratyphoid fever, scabies, polio. These are all diseases that are related to poor sanitation practices. What I feel is the most important is to increase awareness. We should also make sure that we ensure government regulations are being maintained. We can increase infrastructure by digging wells, boreholes in communities. We have to also monitor to make sure that the standard of water quality is maintained in that community by doing surveillance. There are simple measures we can take at home to make sure we're safe from the water we drink and also our surrounding. One, it's by boiling your water for 1 minute. Once you can boil your water, it kills germs, bacteria, viruses for 1 minute, and then it's safe to drink. Secondly, there are purification tablets, which are chemicals that help to kill all these viruses, and it's safe to drink. There are also water filters. You can use water filters that filter these organisms, and it's safe to drink. You shouldn't drink from a contaminated source. Try to drink from boreholes and wells, and also store your water in a clean container with a lid. Hand washing has evidently been shown that it drastically reduces the risk of waterborne diseases. You have to make sure that you dispose your waste. Keep your environment clean, because if you leave food particles around, you're attracting rodents to come and feed on it, and they pass. Your surrounding also involves cleaning the grass. Don't keep any water, because mosquitoes grow in this stagnant water. And we know that malaria is one of the most challenging diseases.
As access to clean drinking water becomes increasingly difficult in many parts of the world, one company is using an innovative technology to help address this problem for underserved communities in the United States. VOA's Julie Taboo has more.
Safe drinking water is a vital resource that is out of reach for 1 of 3 people worldwide, according to the World Health Organization. That includes more than 2 million Americans living without running water, something the nonprofit firm Dig Deep is working to help solve.
Native American families are 19 times more likely than white families to not have running water, and Black and Latino households are twice as likely.
The Navajo Nation is the country's largest Native American reservation, stretching across the western states of Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. 40% of the population here has no running water, meaning people must often travel up to 100 kilometers into town and back to get it. To help address this water shortfall, the company Source Global has installed hydro panels to collect vapor from the air and create clean drinking water for 500 homes.
When you see a Source hydro panel, it looks a little bit like a normal solar module, except for just a little thicker. And what it's doing is taking in sunlight and air to make perfect drinking water. If you and I were to take one out of a box and set it up on the ground in 15 minutes, half an hour later, we get a glass of water.
Every hydro panel is effectively an independent water supply. That's a life-changing development on the Navajo Nation, especially for older community members.
The reality is that high-income countries have these invisible water crises where the communities within their boundaries that don't have running water are often ignored, and that's just not acceptable.
With climate change and aging infrastructure contributing to population pressures on water supplies, Wechter says what's needed is comprehensive, proactive outreach to every community without safe drinking water. Julie Tabo, VOA News.
The World Health Organization has announced that COVID-19 no longer constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says the decision is based on decreasing numbers of hospitalizations, intensive care units admissions, and deaths due to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. However, he says the pandemic is not over, and thousands of people are still dying from the virus every week. On the other hand, experts have identified a new strain of coronavirus they say tends to give people pink eye. XBB.1.116 or Actures is a strain of COVID-19's Omicron variant. First reported in January, the strain has spread in nations such as India and Indonesia. Actures tends to produce conjunctivitis, commonly known as pink eye, particularly when it affects children. It can cause mild to severe eye irritation, cloudy vision, and even discharge from the eye. An activist in Ghana is swimming the nearly 500-kilometer-long Volta River, including Lake Volta, to bring attention to worsening water pollution. Yvette Tete, who will swim several hours per day for over a month, is also collecting water samples along the way to test for pollution. Senanu Todd reports from Lake Volta, Ghana.
Ghana's Lake Volta is the world's largest man-made lake by surface area, and activist Yvette Tete is swimming its entire length as part of her swim across the Volta River's almost 500 kilometers. In less than a month, Tete swam 300 kilometers, up to 14 per day, to raise awareness on Ghana's worsening water pollution.
There's no action that people take unless they care. And so what we're doing with this swim is just basically bringing people into the experience of what it feels like, what it is to be in this absolutely incredible part of Ghana, and to show them it is worth it to bring our attention to the space to make sure that we're preserving the beauty.
Tete is accompanied by researchers from the All Foundation, which is supporting her swim and advocates against textile waste. They are collecting water and air samples along the way to study what is driving water pollution. Ghana imports about 50 million pieces of second-hand clothes each week, but the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change says about 40% of it ends up in landfills and then in water.
The number of clothing tentacles at the beachfronts and water bodies has increased over time. Now, microfibers and chemicals from these items of clothing that are overrun across the beaches, leach into the water and end up polluting the water for the communities that live in and around the water bodies.
The United Nations says 76% of Ghanaian households are at the risk of drinking contaminated water. Ecological researcher Joe Siao Ayesu is leading the All Foundation's team. He says the team hopes its research will cause clothing manufacturers to be held accountable for waste products shipped to Ghana. Tete says by completing the swim, she hopes to inspire others to protect the environment, one stroke at a time. Sana Anutot for VOA News, Lake Volta, Ghana.
That's our show for today. For more health news, wellness tips, and medical breakthroughs, stay connected to Voice of America at voaafrica.com. You can follow me on Twitter at MkamitiVOA. Until next time, stay well and strive to make every day a healthy day.